Hey, hello there. In this program, I'm going to compare 3 different kinds of cherry tomatoes and let you know which ones grew best. I'm also going to review a new pruning technique that I used on these plants. Now, before I get into that, I want to let you know that I've written a book called Growing Great Tomatoes. It's a 75-page ebook. It's free. Tells you everything you need to know about tomatoes. In fact, 2 of these cherry tomatoes are listed in the book as some of the best to grow. If you want that book, there'll be a link in the description below. Now let me describe the growing conditions here. This is a new garden. It's not an established vegetable garden. It gets a fair amount of sun from about 11 o'clock till 5 o'clock. The soil is fairly heavy clay. You can see behind me there's some evergreens here, so there's roots from those trees. So the tomatoes have to fight against these roots. There's not a lot of organic matter in the soil yet. I'm slowly building it up, but my other garden is much better than here. So I would say this test is what you'd expect if you were starting a new garden and your soil's not great. Let me introduce the contestants. Over here on my right is the Sweet 100. I've been growing this tomato for almost 50 years, and if I could only grow one type of tomato, it would be the Sweet 100. Well, at least that was what I told people a couple years ago. Over the years, it's been a great producer. I always get a good crop. It's one of the first tomatoes in my garden that produces something I can eat. And remember, I'm in a short season. It's a zone 5 here, so having them early is important to us. Good tasting, high yields, grows well, fairly disease resistant. It's a great cherry tomato. Now in the middle here is a new tomato for me. I did grow it last year, and it was very successful. So I decided to grow it again this year. This tomato is called Purple. Now I know some of you are saying, oh, I've grown purple tomatoes before. No, you probably haven't grown this one. This is the world's first GMO tomato. It was released last year, and so this is only the 2nd year you could be growing it. You can tell the difference between this purple and the other purple tomatoes on the market. This one, when you cut it open, is deep purple on the inside. There's nothing else like it on the market. We grew it last year, had good yield, and the fruit was very tasty. Now it tastes different than your standard tomato. It's quite different than the Sweet 100s, but we actually liked this taste better last year than the Sweet 100s. On the left here is a new tomato for me. Now it's quite popular, but I've just never grown it. It's called Sun Gold. I hadn't been in the nursery in the early spring and picked up a plant. So these 2 are my own seedlings. Sun Gold over here was a smaller seedling that I got from the nursery. Planted all 3 the same day. They got exactly the same care. They've been watered a few times. They don't get watered a lot because we're on a slope here, and every time it rains, all the water runs down into the garden here, and it stays fairly moist. You can see the plants are growing quite well. So let's compare these. First thing I like to look at is yield. Which one has produced the most number of fruit? It's kind of a toss-up. All 3 plants are producing a lot of cherry tomatoes. And quite honestly, I'm not sure there's a clear winner here. Now, I could sit down and count them all, but I'm not going to do that. There's hundreds of tomatoes here. If I had to pick a winner, I think the Sun Gold might be slightly ahead of the other 2. How about the size of the fruit? That's also important. You might get a lot of small tomatoes, but what you really want is some good sized ones. When it comes to size, Sweet 100 are the smallest and purple are the largest. Sun Gold is between the 2. In fact, I'm quite surprised at how small the Sweet 100s are doing here. In my other garden that has really good soil and where I've been gardening for 20 years, Sweet 100 produces larger fruit than here. I don't know how these other 2 would do over there. But in this spot where they're getting the same condition, purple is the largest. How about plant growth? Now this plant looks like it's taller, but I don't think there's more plant growth here. This plant here has kind of fallen down. The way it's being pruned here is allowing it to cascade more. So the branches are quite tall and would be up here. It's just my pruning hasn't been great, so it's cascading. But I think the plant growth is about the same on the 3 of them. How about taste? That's also really important. Well, I really like Sweet 100s. They're at the top of the list for me for taste. If you're looking for a traditional tomato flavor, and they're a bit on the sweeter side. Purple has a very unique flavor, but as I mentioned before, my wife and I actually prefer purple over the Sweet 100. The flavor is different, but it's really nice flavor. Now, a lot of people rave about Sun Gold as being a very flavorful tomato. My personal opinion is that it's not all that great tasting, not compared to these other two. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a good tasting tomato, but if I had to choose one of these, it wouldn't be Sun Gold. There's one other characteristic that's really important, and that's cracking. Now, we've had a really dry August, and then in the last week, we've had a fair amount of rain. When you get a lot of moisture in the ground, either from rain or from watering, the tomato plant will take it up through the roots and it'll push it up into the plant, and it can put too much water into the fruit. Then they crack. Sweet 100s are notorious for cracking. Now, that's not a problem for me, and I'll explain why in a minute. The Sun Golds haven't cracked at all. The Sweet 100s have. Purple, no cracking whatsoever. In fact, the purple has a thicker skin. Now, I know that makes it sound like it's not good tasting. Who wants a thick skin? But it's just a bit thicker. It's still very good eating, but that thicker skin prevents cracking entirely here. Now, the way I overcome cracking with Sweet 100s is that I just pick the fruit earlier. With all my tomatoes, I don't wait until they're red. I pick them at the breaker stage. That's when they have a pink blush, or in this case, a black blush, or an orange blush. I pick them, bring them in the house, let them ripen there. And if you do that, you never have cracking over here. So which one is the winner? Well, if I had the space, I'd actually grow all three of them. I really like cherry tomatoes. Gives you a variety of colors, which is nice. Also gives you 3 different distinct flavors. But if I could only grow one of these, the winner is purple. Now, some of you are going to go, oh, but that's a GMO. I don't want GMO. If you feel that way, you don't actually understand the value of GMO, or understand some of the concerns about GMO. There's nothing wrong with this tomato. It's as healthy and as good for you as any other tomato. This is my #1 choice this year in this growing condition. Now, I've also grown the Sweet 100 and the purple out in front of the house, and there too, purple is doing better than the Sweet 100. That soil is a little bit better and they get a little more sun there. So there you have it. My pick is the purple. Now, let me take a few seconds and talk about this pruning technique. I usually prune to 1 or 2 stems, and I take off all the other suckers. This year I thought I'd try something completely new, and I left everything. As the shoots grew, I just tied them up in a big bun here. I figured more leaves, more growth, more tomatoes. And in fact, that is what you get. The problem with this technique is it's really hard to find the tomato, so harvesting is more difficult. You got to come in here and dig away and try and find those tomatoes. I'm also not convinced I got a much bigger yield this way, but according to the research, this will give you a bigger yield than if you prune them to 1 stem. Pruning to 1 stem is also more work, and that's a good reason not to do it. I think next year I'll prune them to 1 stem the way I have been for many years, but grow them a little closer together. That way I have more plants and I can produce just as many tomatoes. Now, if you'd like to learn more about different pruning techniques and what the pros and cons are, have a look at this video here. And if you're sitting there with lots of tomatoes, but they're all green and you're wondering why and what you can do about it, you gotta watch this here. Happy gardening.